I've literally found myself laying on the side of just a rocky slope. I'm trying to take a break. I lean back and I see a jet at 30,000 feet flying across. And I actually feel envious. I'm like, that sumbitch got a Coca-Cola sitting on his head, right?
You know the day destroys the night, night divides the day. Try to run, try to hide, break on through to the other side, break on through to the other side, break on through to the other side.
God bless America. Welcome to The Ranch, everybody. The podcast that explores the people and happenings of Dry Creek Ranch, Eagle, and the greater Boise area. My guest today is a man of many, many talents. He owns the Ripple Ranch. He's an incredible goat expert. He owns an international travel company. He's wild. Beyond that, he is one of the rare people I've met who is incredibly well-read and really trying to think through life. The conversations we got into about his own life journey leading him to where he is and hearing his thoughts on a myriad of different things was such an eye-opening and beautiful experience for me. I really, really hope this is one of many with this individual, but I'll let you hear from him. Without further ado, the man, the myth, the legend, Marc Warnke. No sweat, man. Marc, thank you for coming. I appreciate it. I know scheduling was a little rough. You got your deliveries and stuff. So the fact that we could line this up, I'm excited to talk to you. So a lot of people locally know you as the goat guy, right? I'm dealing with pack goat equipment, goat products, but local is not the only place you're known, right? Like you're effectively known worldwide for a myriad of things.
Yeah, I would say I'm known more globally than I am locally. We're trying to have more of a footprint locally because this is home, right? But because of Instagram and YouTube and Facebook and basically the English-speaking world needing help with goats, and that's kind of been the line, we just have way more of a global presence than we do a local presence.
When you say the English-speaking world needing help with goats, like I've never meandered through my day and been like, gosh, if only there was a dude to help me with my goat problem. Like,
right.
It's not really a thing. Like, what do you mean by that?
So when homesteaders, the top 100 homesteaders in the United States were surveyed recently, they ranked the goat as the second most difficult animal to raise. So a lot of people think they'll eat anything. They don't really need much care. And it's just, it's lack of information. So goats are complex. When somebody teaches you, then it's pretty easy, but they're a complex animal with complex nutrition needs, mineral needs, and care. You got to trim hooves and, you got to give them vaccinations and all that stuff. And vet care is super expensive. So goats are kind of seen as the poor man's stock animal, right? They're affordable. You can buy a baby for $50 or $100. You can raise it up and butcher it a year later, and it's, 150 pounds, those sorts of things. But because goats are complex, it's literally one of the last bastions of like word of mouth help, especially here in the United States. Vets don't know goats. Scientific community is barely beginning to see the value in studying goats. Goats have always been seen by agriculture as a disposable animal. So they're so cheap that if one gets sick, it's easier to throw it in the dead pile and then just get another one to replace it. And so as a result of that, and they're an incredibly complex critter. I mean, I've been training hunting dogs since I was 12. I've been intimate with nature for 50 years. I pay attention to the nuances of animals, intelligence, habits. I was a bioengineering major in college. I mean, I've always been deeply interested in dogs and cats and farms and chickens, and I'm kind of nerdy, man. I'm kind of the guy that like sits there and watch chickens eat because I find it interesting and see. When I was a little kid, I would feed a spider grasshoppers and watch how it wound them up and check back 2 laters and see if it was eating, and then check back 2 laters and see that it had taken it out and disposed of it, and then realized, oh my God, at the base of every spider web is a little carcass pile. And, just those discoveries of a curious mind in a kid. And so my curiosity with goats and all that stuff led me down the path to look for mentors and people who could teach me more about them. And it's really a super beautiful, complex animal that's highly brilliant. I mean, goats are cattle dog smart, super easy to train. And when they're bonded, they're like a golden retriever with horns. I mean, they literally are a better pet than a dog. And I'm a very practical guy. So it's important for people to realize the place I come from. When my goats get old, I feed them their last bucket of grain, which is the thing they love most on the planet. I shoot them in the back of the head. I cut their head off. I butcher their meat, and I put it in my freezer because I see it as the most respectful exit to their existence versus me throwing them in a hole. You know, I think it's disrespectful for that life that did their intended purpose, which was to exist and feed something. And so to not let them feed anything but worms has always felt disrespectful for me. But it takes me like a week to 2 weeks to recover from shooting one of my friends and butchering their body and cutting their head off and doing that stuff. But they deserve my courage and my respect. And, you know, energetically, I think that those things have a lifespan. I think they carry through when we have genuine intention. And, you know, and that goes down the whole Ripple Ranch. You know, the ranch that I own, it's called Ripple Ranch. And what it is our mission in life is to ripple out kindness, gratitude, and joy to the world. And so when people come on to our place, in any interaction, they leave with more love in their heart, more kindness in their heart, and a sense of gratitude. And that ripples out through humanity. I've spent an enormous amount of time studying a subject that I find super interesting, which is death. If you think about modern day's culture and how they look at death from a place of something to be avoided, something to be scared of. And if you think about the relationship of death and birth, they're actually just two bookends. And we celebrate and look forward to birth, but death is this giant looming cloud that most of us, you know, deal with. And death is one of the most beautiful lessons we get the opportunity to learn from. It's loaded with beauty. And I think if we can change how we have a relationship with that. And here's the example I give to people, and I gave in the documentary that I was recently on, is that 200 years ago, lifespans as a 53-year-old man, I'm an old man back then, probably don't have any teeth left in my mouth, you know, having a hard time, you know, with bacterial infections in my mouth. Teeth basically killed people in the old days. And so what would have happened at my age is I already probably would have lost my spouse. I would have lost one of my children. I would have lost both my parents and my grandparents. And I would have lost a lot of members of my community because these are tight-knit communities. It's not like the people we interact with is the people that lived within 5 miles. And so we were close with them all. And it was normal to have more intimate relationships with these people because these are who you grew up with. You grew up there. And so when those people passed, I literally washed the body of my mother. I cleaned up the poop in the bed. I put her in a hole in the ground. I threw a shovel of dirt on her face, and we said some words. It wasn't that like death happened like it does today, behind a white door with a white coat, paying people to keep us comfortable as our things die. And at the same time, you have this detachment from food where people actually think that chicken just magically appears in a cellophane wrapper in the grocery store. And that's another thing. Back in those days, there was no refrigeration. So if you wanted to eat meat, you either needed to kill something yourself or you needed to know somebody who would kill it for you. And you needed to do it often. You had to kill animals weekly, daily to be able to have food on the table that was, you know, high protein and high fat. And so we have this complete disassociation with the process of death in our culture, and it's getting worse. We're paying for our hitman. We're paying for people to bury our loved ones and keep us comfortable during it and not deal with it. And I spend a lot of time helping people to realize that the most fantastic opportunities to become a more evolved human being often shows up in the most tragic events. We're not really accelerating in our growth curve as a human being when things are going great. We're actually getting a lot better when it's freaking hard. And I think that's how God set it up. I study a lot of different faiths, and methodologies and the way people think about things. And I'm not jaded. I don't just have one way I look. I choose Christianity because that's the one that makes the most sense to me. But I pay attention to the Mormons. I pay attention to the Buddhists. I pay attention to the Scientologists. One of the greatest, I mean, Scientology is as goofy as it comes, but they have a line that they teach their people, and it's called the law of equal exchange. It's if any relationship gets out of balance in the energetic exchange between two, there's always disenchantment, and that always has to kind of be rebuffed, those separations. So things like that are what I look deeply into. And how did we go to goats to Scientology? I'm not sure, but
listen, I don't want you to stop. I love every second of this.
Okay.
This podcast is brought to you by MTU Studios. If you're looking to start a podcast or need content for your business or personal use, content of any type, please reach out to MTU Studios. MTUstudios.com. We'd love to help. One thing that you said, one of many things that's really interesting to me is we relish so much in life, right? When people are born, obviously, that's a really clear event that it's like, hey, look, we made life, right? And if people are lucky enough to have kids, they experience that, and I'm very fortunate to have 3 boys, and it's beautiful. But the whole life and death thing, right? Life and death. This is a life and death situation. We shy so intensely away from death. And obviously, like, nobody wants to die. I don't want my loved ones dying. And what you're pointing out, it's like, look, if you had 5 kids, like 2 or 3 of them survived, right? Like, people would have 10 kids because they needed help on the farm.
Right.
And we didn't have, antibiotics and, your teeth rotting out and, like, why people don't understand. You didn't, a bunch of French aristocracy, absolutely died because they got diabetes because they found sugar and, like, they were having all this stuff. And it's like just this horrible existence. They're amputating things. I mean, that's what life was 200 years ago. It was just brutal. Right. So if you made it to 53 and you were doing okay, it's like, great, but you've seen some shit. And my dad actually recently, he had a heart event earlier this year, and it wasn't looking good, and in a sense improved, which is wonderful. But when it happened, my wife looked at me. She's like, well, listen, should he move down here? He was living up in Anchorage in Alaska. And he did. He did move down to the area close by us, because we went to him. We're like, listen, we want to help you through this. Like, if this is the end, we want to take care of you. And I've seen a lot of people kind of, and he's a physician as well, and he's seen a lot of people. It's like when somebody gets sick or when something bad happens, it's this whole scramble. Like, it's almost like it's not supposed to happen. I read a beautiful article years back that was talking about the relationship and disassociation with our food and death, exactly as what you're talking about. Everybody used to experience death. Everybody used to experience death with our food. They were participating in it, or they knew who was doing it, but they weren't afraid of it. And when people went to pass, they were like, this is part of it, right? Like, this is part of the beautiful existence of life. So for you to overtly acknowledge that, it's like, look, there's beauty in this, in all of it. You can't just say one's good and one's bad. They're intimately connected. That you can't disassociate life and death. And to run away from it so intensely and have such a weird relationship with it is something that I think limits people in their relationships, even with humans, let alone their food.
Right. Yeah. It has, it bleeds into too in our culture to be comfortable, right? So we have this deep desire as human beings to be comfortable. If you look at how a lot of, people exist, they don't have a chair to sit in, so they squat. They're cooking their food over charcoal. They don't have a refrigerator. So there's a massive part of this world who's still living like we did 200 years ago because of poverty, right? And you and I have both been, and every person finds themselves in what I would call like a survival mode aspect, right? Where you're not sure what the next thing is going to be.
Right.
So it never allows for forward thinking. You can't think about the benefit of humanity when your basic needs aren't met. Am I going to eat? Do I have somewhere to sleep tonight? Can I drink water? Right. And so we have this and I think humanity was made to kind of be on the edge of that. I think we were supposed to eat ramen in college. I think we were supposed to be uncomfortable. I think we were supposed to do those. But if you look at how we've engineered our culture, and because of the wealth of this culture, we've engineered comfort at every corner. We drive in heat controlled vehicles.
Right. I turned the heating on my steering wheel on this morning. It was like 5:30. I'm going to jiu-jitsu, and I literally turned I'm like, what world am I living in? Like, my hand's a little cold. I'm like, let me make this thing I'm holding onto a little hot. And I just hit a button and a light comes on. I'm like, what just happened? Like, what is this?
Right. Yeah. Well, and I find myself in moments, I relish in my life in being, it's this weird paradox for me. There's this loving to be on the edge of suffering, like physically. I like physically challenging things. This year I did like 480 miles in the backcountry, most of it above 9,000 feet, and, did about 70 days in a sleeping bag, or 70 nights in a sleeping bag. And that's pretty average for me. I've done that a fair amount of my adult life. And there's this really interesting creature comfort things with beds. There's also with routine, also the optimum food and food choices that I'm intermingled with regularly when I'm in the backcountry, because I spend so much time back there. And I've literally found myself laying on the side of just a rocky slope. I'm trying to take a break. I lean back and I see a jet at 30,000 feet flying across, and I actually feel envious. I'm like, that sumbitch got a Coca-Cola sitting on his head, right? I'm like, the last place I like to be is on an airplane, but it's amazing how creature comforts, like choices of food, choices of sleeping, having those kind of things. But I don't know if I think we've lost touch with that hard stuff, because we've worked so terribly hard as a culture to keep ourselves crazy comfortable, that the only real discomfort we deal with regularly is still the emotional, psychological, relational, that sort of thing. But we've lost a lot of the physical discomforts, the food discomforts, the things, the more tactile stuff, right, that we control in our environment. And I got soft feet just like you. I sit there in ooh and awe to walk barefoot across the rocks, and maybe you don't, but I mean, we're soft.
Dude, my dog does. I got a French bulldog. There are rocks out here. And he's like, you can see him. I'm like, what is wrong? Like, you're a dog. Come on, man.
Right.
Yeah. There's you mentioned self-growth before we went hot. And there's an aspect of self-growth that in my life I have found impossible to actually attain outside of exceeding difficulty. And I think everybody has a relationship with somebody who's sought self-growth by, just getting totally comfortable. It's like, let's pull up the blanket, let's sleep a little longer, I need to treat myself right. I need to mend me. They go inward, right? They just focus 100% on like any ouchy point I have in my life, I need to eliminate it. And a lot of times those people, when I meet them, it's kind of like, oh, you threw the anchor overboard. It's like you came to a grinding halt, because you can always continue to find additional layers of hurt. If you're like, am I happy? Am I really happy? Am I really, really happy? It's like, oh, well, I'm not. Well, there must be something wrong. For me, the greatest lessons about myself have always emerged in these horrifically painful, difficult endeavors. I used to, before I moved here, I would train, this place I trained jiu-jitsu was about 3 miles away, and I'd go and train for an hour and a half. But after a while, I was like, I'm kind of wasting time driving here. I should probably run. So I started running the 3 miles to training. Run, train, run back. And then after a while, I was like, I should probably carry some bricks, right? So it's like, start running with bricks.
Right.
So running the 3 miles with bricks, and it was horrible, right? And then eventually I was like, I should just put on a weight vest and the bricks. So now I'm running with this 50-pound weight vest and these bricks in my hand, 3 miles. I get there, and then there are these, 200-pound gorillas trying to choke me, train for an hour and a half, and then I have to run home. I don't have a car there. Like, I don't have friends. I'm not calling an Uber. Like, I have friends, but they're all going off to do whatever. And the things I would learn about myself in those days, especially on the run home, were so unbelievably, they were not just relevant, but it was like they were one layer under where I didn't recognize what was sitting there. And when you stripped everything away from me, my ego, my capacity to tolerate pain, like all of these things. And I would be about 1.5 miles in every single time I'd start bawling. Like I'm running down this main drag right across from this nursery. People are coming in and out on a Saturday. And here comes Matt, like hysterical, carrying these bricks. People are like, what is wrong with that guy? But again, it allowed me to see priorities. It allowed me to recognize the things that didn't matter. It allowed me to forgive people that I had been holding on. It's like, I can't hold on to a grudge when I'm on like the verge of death. Right. And that's really, I would get home and I'd collapse onto my lawn and just put a hose on my face. Right. It's like 100 degrees out. I'd have nothing left to give. It's so upsetting to me when I see people trying to make themselves more and more and more comfortable as a way to understand themselves. When my greatest experience in self-understanding came through adversity.
Right. Interesting. Well, that that leads me down. So at Ripple Ranch, our goal is to, again, help people through different mediums, right? So we moved there almost 2 years ago, and we have toiled. I mean, that the genuine word of toil. We have worked our asses off. 3 miles of fence, built a meeting space that can hold kind of a yoga style studio. We help people with PTSD recovery and trauma recovery in there, addiction recovery as well. And we built a cold plunge that's a natural creek that flows through the property, and a sauna. And each house, it's like a 15-person sauna and a 15-person cold plunge. And I am somebody who used to say that cold water's my kryptonite. We would pack into the backcountry. People would strip down naked, go swimming in the lake, and I'd be like, well, what the hell are you doing? That's cold water. That's awful, right? Because I hate cold water. And so I began to research the value of cold plunging on a medicinal level. And it's so profoundly healthy, it was too powerful for me to ignore. And I say, if other people can do it, I can do it. So I began to lean into that process. And what it's now become is like this. So the health benefits are amazing, but there is almost no faster way that I can take a person and put them in a panic state than put them in a cold plunge, right?
Every single fiber is like, danger, this is horrible.
Right, yeah, for sure. Yeah. So we'll go in with like 5 to 10 people into the cold plunge. And when we go into the cold plunge, I talk about the medicinal benefits, but you have to do it 3 times a week, 4 times a week to do that. I'm exposing them to that aspect, but my goal is more the mental learning that happens from cold plunging, because you have this capability to use breath and self-talk and all kinds of things to put down anxiety and panic. And anxiety is a much more prolific thing going on in our culture than I think any of us realize. And so I think both for you and for your listeners, one of my gifts is explaining difficult to hard to understand concepts and make them simply understood, right? And so anxiety was something that I learned about in my 40s. It was actually when I was in marriage counseling, and we were kind of at the end. We were at the, hey, we either, hit one over the fence or we're not going to make it. And the counselor's attempt to help us to learn something, she was really pointed, and she said, I'm not big on giving advice, but this is one time where I'm going to step in. And she spoke to my ex-wife. So that's the end of that story. But she spoke to my ex-wife and said, I just need to let you know, I believe you are a long-term sufferer of anxiety. And so I'm going to explain to you what that is, and I'm going to tell you her explanation, because I think it's so important people to understand, because I think it's way more prolific in our culture than we think. So when let's take an example of you and me sitting down, and you say, hey, Marc, I want to talk finances with you. And all of a sudden I go from what my body's reaction to that, which would be a 4 on a 1 to 10 scale, but all of a sudden I shoot up to an 8 or 9 because of past history and triggering and all kinds of things. 8 or 9 is where the body's in full-blown fight or flight. I'm going to die. I need to do something really drastic about this situation. What most people don't realize, and what I didn't realize, is that the manifestation of that is either fight or flight. And what flight looks like is lots of different things: avoidance, defensiveness, literally shutting down, leaving the room. I thought anxiety meant fear. I didn't realize there was another side of it. And the other side of it is what showed up in me, which is to be a douche. I was grumpy. I would shut people down. I would be aggressive with people I love. When anxiety showed up into me, I was a bear. And I literally felt outside of myself. So I would feel things. And as she was explaining this, I went, well, it's not just her, it's me. I'm the other side of that equation. And that's when I was like launched down the road of understanding my anxiety and how it showed up. Now, here's the interesting part. The parietal and the frontal part of your brain, the decision making, the human side of your brain literally loses all blood flow when you're anxious. And the only thing making decisions is the monkey brain, the base. And it's keeping your heart rate going. It increases it up. It is a response to a jaguar that just stepped out in the trail. But all I'm trying to do is have a financial conversation with somebody, right? So again, normal reaction is a 4. I'm at a 9. All of a sudden I escalate. I devalue what you're trying to say. I say, why do you try to talk about that? I belittle you, whatever it does. Anxiety's little monkey brain is going to punch you in the face. And then what's super interesting, when we reward anxiety with exit from that particular situation, we literally build a neural pathway that says, good job.
Right. This is how you deal with it.
Correct.
Right.
And so then that neural pathway becomes formed because the brain is rewarded with the loss of the stress. And then it goes around the cycle again, and your brain literally tells yourself a story, why that was dangerous, how come it was good to do it, and you're just on this circle. So every time you loop back around that circle again, that neural pathway fires, and that's where you go. So learning how to use things like breath, like in the early stages of me trying to overcome my anxiety, I used like the teaching. I used things like, okay, I'm feeling really anxious right now, so I can't continue this conversation. I need 2 minutes, and I'm going to come back. So I'd go out, and I'd breathe through my nose. Anxious breathing is like this. A parasympathetic system is through your nose. So literally, I can feel my whole body de-escalate in one deep nose breath. Do about 5 of those, now you're back down to 4 again. Okay, this conversation isn't actually dangerous to me. There's no threat. I need to come in with my rational mind, and this is somebody I love. Have this conversation. Don't be overtaken by that thing. And so in the cold plunge, it is a great example of how panic and anxiety doesn't serve you. And you get a chance to like exercise that muscle that says, I have the ability to still have a little inkling of that part of my brain that knows the truth, when my other part of my brain, which is 90% in the moment, screaming, get out, you're in danger. And I can literally just breathe through that. So learning, because if you think about it, the only time panic actually serves a human being is when a jaguar's in the trail. That's it. That means you run the other direction as fast as you can. That little slim moment is the only time panic serves you. Panic disservices you in most of humanity. Panic is a very poor reaction to anything other than it is life-threatening. Yet we go into panic or low panic mode regularly throughout our days. It's what causes road rage. It's what causes all these really escalated, because anxiety has this little slippery thing. It tells you you have to do something about it right now, and you have to do it at a 10, right? So you don't have this ability to just kind of gracefully go, man, why'd that dick cut me off, right? It's, right? So that's that monkey brain that comes in, and there's so many different facets that I see show up in humanity. So the cold plunge is such a great opportunity to sit with panic for 3 minutes. And that's a hard 3 minutes. I get you. And on top of it, you have 10 other people in there sitting with it with you. And there's this beautiful energetic exchange from people who are doing courageous acts. It's like they borrow each other's courage, right? It's like there's this bubble of courage. I'm telling you, if I got out of 10 people, I asked them to get in the cold plunge alone, they would be out in 20 seconds. But when we all go in there, they all do the 3 minutes. I've never had one person get out. And my cold plunge is like 38 degrees. I mean, we're chipping out ice. It's cold, right? Then we get out. And it's what you spoke about just now that led me that direction is it offers an opportunity for like a complete state change. So now we're in this basis. And at the same time, our dopamines are really high and all that stuff. So literally we get out of the cold plunge and it's always warm when you get out. And it gives us an opportunity to like share, okay, how'd that feel for you? What went on? And people get really transparent and really real. And it's this beautiful moment to start introducing, which I introduce a lot of people to at my ranch, which is I call it intimate acquaintanceship. Intimate acquaintanceship used to be super normal. We used to be able to share in an intimate way with somebody that we weren't intimate with. Hey, how's your marriage going? Well, it's good. Yeah, it's been kind of a struggle, but man, I'm so blessed in this area and whatever. That should be normal exchange to humanity. There is a thing of oversharing. I get that part. But we should not just be talking about the weather. We shouldn't just be talking about, this base level stuff all the time. It's a muscle that is retarded in our body and in our culture now. So that's an opportunity to have these intimate shares, talking about the things that you're feeling successful at and the things that you wish were different, right? And then we go into the sauna afterwards, and nobody's allowed to talk. So we just don't talk. We get into the sauna, and I turn on really amazing, powerful music, and I ask the whole group just to focus on one thing. What are you grateful for? And you cannot believe, people cry, and it's this really beautiful moment where the music is medicine, vibration is medicine, community is medicine, authenticity is medicine. And we're not getting enough medicine in our culture, right? And so that's where the whole mission of Ripple Ranch, and yeah, I think goats are awesome and I can help them with them and they're great. But it's, 100,000 people follow me on Instagram because they think I'm cool running goats in the mountains. But these are the messages I want them to hear, the struggle for me in life. And I'll back up and just let you know kind of a little bit more. I believe I am a high functioning Asperger's guy, a little bit. And so it made being with people really hard for me, especially young in life. On top of it, 7 marriages and divorces by the time I was like 5. So here's your new mom, here's your new dad, no stability, notes on the mirror, dad's leaving, all that ruckus that went on with all that stuff. And it ended up producing a kid who really couldn't find himself in the world, didn't know how to relate to his peers. And at the same time, honestly, I felt like if you looked in my little brown bag, you'd see a bucket of shit. I just didn't feel like I was a worthy human being. So no self-confidence, no stability at home, and great difficulty interacting with peers. And so for me, like finding my way in the world was hard. It was hard. When I discovered things like what I call courage cola, which alcohol was for me, and it allowed me to be a little looser socially, man, that felt great. And then 4 years later, I'm looking around and I'm like, I don't want to be a drunk, and so I quit drinking, and I've been sober for 30 years. But that discovery process and the part of trying to kind of break that family legacy and feeling really unsuccessful in relating to humanity and relationships and just the clunkiness of how do I be with people. I threw away my TV. I got sober, and I only read for information for 7 years. And I was like really serious about it. I mean, I went to a meeting every night for 7 years, an AA meeting or NA or ACOA or Al-Anon or something like that. And then I read like 3 books a week. I read hundreds and hundreds of books, and I never read for pleasure. I always read how to be a better human being, how to be a better business owner, all those things, because I felt like I had this duty to try to relearn how to remake myself in some sort. So yeah, I've spent a whole life of this in search of just becoming a better human being. And now, due to some really neat events that happened in my life, I feel like I have this duty to humanity, not to share in my wisdom, because I'm honestly, again, I'm a parroter of great books and great people. You know, I've sought out brilliant minds in my life and sat down and talked with them for hours. And I find brilliant people super curious, and especially ones that are wordsmiths. And it's really nice to see your wordsmithery and your ability to, you know, speak the English language. I enjoy our conversation. But I've had so many of those with so many great people. Not much of my thought is original. It's mostly that I have this crazy memory for what's told to me or what I read, and I can spit it back out eloquently. So, and again, I'm not quite sure how we circled around.
Listen to me.
Yeah.
I don't want you to worry about that at all.
Yeah.
I actually, one of my first podcasts years ago was about who owns a thought, right? Because it's like, you know, I read a lot of philosophy, and I take in information like crazy. So it's like, at what point do I own my thought? And I think at the very least, you need to give yourself a little credit for the thoughts that you're not reproducing, that you don't believe, right? So even if you weren't the original person to come up with some principle or idea, if you see it working out in your life, then at the very least you can agree with it because you think it is the right thing. Right. So like somebody put some kind of focus on you, and then your life played out that way. I think where people really get in trouble is they don't have the capacity to discern between the things that sound great, but don't really, either they do resonate in their life or they don't. They just start spitting out all this stuff because they think it sounds great. Those are people that I get very worried. I'm like, who are you actually? Like, are you just holding all of these different things and throwing them out and seeing what sticks and then running, like you lean into that when you're talking to somebody? Or do you actually think something, even if you weren't the first person to point it out, which would, like comedians, right? Like, I love comedians. I think their insight obviously is really profound in a lot of social settings. But, you know, just because somebody points something out, like Shane McGillis might point something out, it's not like, yeah, I didn't come up with that thought, but it resonates with me and I may agree with him. And I get to say, hey, I think that I agree with him. One thing that you were saying with the going from the cold plunge to the sauna, and that, you know, people share, they have this traumatic experience in the cold plunge, and then they come out and they share with each other, and then they go into this hot world. It's another stress, but you don't allow them to continue the conversation, and they just have to be there with their thoughts and feeling, you know, the warmth. Going from cold to hot, by the way, is just, it's magical. Like it is something else.
Yeah.
But the emotional tie to that, I couldn't, it's so hard, I think, for people to understand how close you feel with somebody when you've gone through something with them. And even if it's that you're intentionally stepping into a cold plunge, or, you know, some of my dearest friends, all of my dearest friends, in fact, I've been through something with them. I don't generally have friends for friends' sake. I usually had some goal or some endeavor, and there was somebody else that I found shoulder to shoulder with me going through this endeavor. It's very difficult for me to make friends just to have a friend. Because ultimately, if you have a friend just to have a friend, the whole point of the exchange was really just, hey, we kind of like this, right? Like, we kind of like, you know, chatting with each other or whatever, which is, again, fine. I don't think that's a problem. But ultimately, you will hit a point in any serious friendship where you're like, I don't really like you right now, and this isn't really fun. And if the whole goal was to just have fun in this person's presence, well, then the entire relationship falls apart. It's like, you know, I'm upset that we're no longer having that fun. That's why I have you around. I'm not really interested in you, right?
Interesting.
And those exchanges, even when they are fun, they always, to me, it's like level 1 fun. It's fun because it's fun, right? And in my experience with jiu-jitsu friends, for instance, I was there at 5:36 this morning. We're doing these sit-ups warming up, and I'm just cracking up that it's like, what in the hell am I doing here? Like, what? And again, we're all in it, right? And these are adults and just giant dudes, like working for the jail system or whatever, like huge people that are there. And just feeling the level of camaraderie and actual connection with these guys as we're doing these sit-ups, cracking jokes at each other, then go and try to choke each other or break arms, and then having the release and comfort of community at the end of practice, just sitting there drenched in sweat, talking with people about nonsense, right? Like every intimate exchange, I don't think has to be like a confession, right? It doesn't have to be
not
this
at all.
like, oh my gosh, I did this one. But having that community and connection rooted around shared difficulty and authenticity is it's something that, like, if I don't go in the morning or the afternoon, I feel like my day is somehow significantly worse. I don't know what it is. It's like I lacked the community that would get me there.
Right. Well, sorry.
Yeah, take your time, man. It's not a problem. Are you too hot or are you too cold?
Yeah, no, they say, I don't know if you studied chess masters, but chess masters and professional poker players burn between 6,000 and 8,000 calories.
Bring this back a little bit closer to you.
Okay.
There you go. Yeah,
There we go.
I have read that. I very much enjoy chess. So the cognitive burn is real. Like,
right. Yeah. It's really interesting. But so yeah, I get hot when I'm talking.
Yeah. I really enjoy playing chess in my sauna.
Interesting.
Because it's so demanding. And I won't do long, elaborate games. I'll do 60-second games.
Right.
So you have to be in the moment. You're responding literally in a half second to what somebody else is doing. And I'll play game after game after game. And it will prevent me from, again, like we were talking about earlier, wallowing in my poor state of existence, right? Like I'm in this sauna, it's 140 or 150 degrees. I'm sweating. It's a mess. And instead of being there and being like, oh yeah, you're like, this is terrible, I'm responding to something. So it brings the anxiety level up to like a 9 after I've been in there for 20 minutes. And then you start playing chess, speed, like as fast as you can, speed chess. It is the crucible, man. I mean, you're a different person when you come out from that.
Interesting. Yeah. We find that the sauna, we keep that space really sacred. So in terms of energetically, Christians would call energy the Holy Spirit, right? The energy or consciousness that connects all things, right? And as I become more tuned into the energy of things that both remain in things and in rooms and in people and in intention and in community, it's really interesting to see like the ripple effect of that as well. And so as I pay attention deeper, intention and why your base level operating system, right? So Nikola Tesla was a really interesting guy. He had way more than just being a super crazy, brilliant scientist that was young and ahead of his time. He also studied, he actually was quoted as saying, if you want to understand the secrets of the universe, you understand vibration, frequency, and energy. And there's no denying the fact that there's even Star Wars talks about it as the Force. All cultures, all faiths, all thinking people believe that there's some kind of energetic bond between all living things and everything. And as you become deeper in meditation, deeper in self-exploration, deeper in the people that you speak to and interact with, and I think all religions choose a different name for it. But when we hold intention in a particular place, that intention is felt when you come in there. And so we really work hard on the ranch to keep things in a sacred way. How we eat our meals, how we greet people, how we show them around the ranch, the sauna, the cold plunge, all those things we really, and I realize that sounds woo-woo, and it sounds woo-woo to me too. But I've done such deep work that I've just become more tuned into it, and it's undeniable. And I think there's a little bit of our modern culture that puts earmuffs on in a way that we used to be able to hear. It's really a great exercise, and so few people do it. But you go into the wilderness with me for a week, no cell phone, no, nothing but a headlamp, only the crackle of a fire, walking a lot of trails, you'll realize how disruptive current humanity is. I mean, it's loud, and it's like bombarding our sensory system on a way that I don't think humanity was really supposed to be existing in. Our feet were made to walk on trails. We were made to carry heavy things. We were made to work. And it wasn't with earbuds in, and it wasn't with honking horns and racing engines and doing 70 miles an hour. That's a really current thing in humanity. That's like this little blip in time that stuff's happened. And we used to see ourselves as like stewards of the land rather than owners of the land. It was how do we make this land better? And it was for our next generation, because it was generational land ownership. I mean, so it's such a different way we think about things. I do want to pivot, if you don't mind, just because go ahead.
Oh, just one more thing before you go. And again, I love where you are with this. There was when you said it's bombarding, the level of distraction, and again, it's through adversity and pain that I feel like the distraction really drops away, because you just can't pay attention to it, right? Like if I was walking down the street not in pain, crying hysterically, looking like a crazy person, I would be very aware of the people around me, the cars driving by, the other people walking by, the people at the store looking at me. I'd be aware of this bombarding kind of like observe the world around you. But when I strip myself down, I did this half Ironman years back. Didn't train. I was like, I don't care. It's going to be fine. And it was it's affectionately called the world's hardest half Ironman, because you got to go. You swim. The swim is the swim. It's no big deal. But then the bike is, you actually do, I think it's like 10,000 feet of elevation. It's this really hilly place in California. And then the run, it's a 13.1 mile run. And you also do like 1,500 feet of elevation, right? So you have to go down into this valley, and then you come back out and you do 3 laps. And so every time you go down, you're like, oh my God, here it comes. And you're crawling yourself back out. And again, that was one of the first times in my life when I really, really understood how distracting everything else was, because you're running on this trail and there's no one else there. Maybe people behind you, ahead of you, whatever, but a lot of times you're just kind of running by yourself. By the end, the field has really thinned out, so there's a lot of space between people. And it's like, oh my God, this is life. Not like this is an enjoyable life, right? Like life is what life is. This is a piece of actual life where I am in extreme exhaustion. I have a task that has to get done. No one else is going to get it done for me. And the only thing I have to do is just continue on down this trail, right? And I know it's going to get worse. And that doesn't matter, right? I was a younger man. I think it was in my early 30s. And it just hit me like that really changed my perspective on, look, what are you doing? Like what are you leaning into? What are you attempting to gain out of the world? Like, what are you doing? And yeah, you've surrounded yourself from the time I graduated from college at 22 until about 30. It's like you've surrounded yourself with all these distractions. iPhones came out. When I graduated, we didn't even have iPhones, right? Like I had a flip phone. And, then I got my first car, and then I got, a house, and I got married. And it was like all of these things all over the place, as we do. I think when people are younger, they start trying to collect things that make them comfortable and are fun. Right, it's like fun. The point of life is fun.
So do you mind if I jump in? Because
no, please.
Please. What you said just sent me down. I do these YouTube videos called Marc's Distinctions, and so it's when I come across like epiphanies, and you just created one. It's really interesting to hear you describe that half Ironman, because if you think about, I think there's a need for humanity to have struggle and strain. I mean, it's literally like a need. We'll self-manufacture it. In fact, so much so, we've built sufferfest into our culture.
Yeah.
Right?
What do you think the Tough Mudder is?
You signed up for, I want to fucking suffer for multiple hours, right? You signed up for it.
I paid money.
You paid for
I paid
it.
money.
Right. So what's really interesting about that is that when you were talking about your mental state during those ends, my thought was, so what would change if the completion of that course had your son's life at stake versus your ego's need to just complete the task. How would that change in complexity? Because that's what our forefathers dealt with. There was a dude, I guarantee you, doing that half triathlon, getting out of the country to save his son because he was on the prairie and he had to go get the country doctor that was in the next town. And he did whatever it took to get there. So men and women have made these incredibly difficult choices because there was no easy route, right? There wasn't. Those choices weren't there. So those were normal. Those were normal to have those moments. And now humanity has found this way. And I'm not saying it's bad, but we're so freaking comfortable now we have to pay to suffer.
Right. Right.
What is crazy?
I actually had this really interesting epiphany over
That's crazy.
Over COVID. Jiu-jitsu is something that checks a lot of boxes for me. It gives me this incredible suffering capacity. It cognitively teaches me things. Community, like it checks all kinds of things for me. Well, guess what? The number one thing you couldn't do when the whole world was terrified of getting a disease, right? So
Right.
The point is that in the absence of that, my life fell apart. It was the darkest year I've had as an adult. It was from 2020 March until 2021 March. It was hellacious, and I was at like red alert. Like I got to the end of 2020, like, oh my God, I'm coming apart. Like this is it. And I finally realized in January, I was like, listen, the formula's simple. You need to find people that are suffering and have a community around pain, and you need to go stand next to them. And I did, and it was one of the greatest realizations about me and who I am. And so I don't lift weights. So like I lifted weights in college. I was on the rowing team, but aside from that, I'm just not like a weight guy. It's not my jam. I like functional strength and complex movements and stuff. But I went down, there was this CrossFit gym that I had driven past that was doing these workouts in the parking lot. And I went down, I was like, hey, I want to sign up. They're like, okay, do you want to do like once a week or like 3 times? I was like, give me unlimited. Like, okay, well, like maybe just start with 2. I was like, give me unlimited. And I showed up every single day. Right. I blew my back out in the middle of week 2. Surprise, right? Didn't stop me from coming. I'd hobble in. I'd go after it. And within a few weeks, all of a sudden, that had become my community. That the people there had recognized who I was, what I was willing to do. They recognized, I saw them. Things started coming out in me again. These self-realizations. I remember one day we were doing these medicine ball slams, right? Just slam the ball, and you had to slam it like 20 times and then run inside and do pull-ups and all this stuff. And most people by like the 3rd round would slam the ball 10 times and take a break and then do another 10. And I remember just doing this slam, getting to 10. It's like, just pick up the ball. All you have to do is pick up the ball. Like, this isn't that complex. You're making it complex. You're sectioning out this, just pick up this. Can you pick up the ball? If you can pick up the ball, pick up the ball. And it was like, boom, and kept going. And people were like, he kept going. It's like, of course you keep going. Can you not? You're just, again, I'm sorry. I know you wanted to pivot. I got really taken by what you'd said.
Yeah, no. It's again, all very interesting. You know, you are somebody who is driven by challenge. Me too. Yes. You know, if I don't feel like there's some difficult thing in front of me, I feel like my spirit's not singing. Filson did a documentary on me called Grit, and Grit is tear-worthy inspiring for me. Like a movie that I can't not cry at is Seabiscuit. And why could I not cry at that? Because I'm so inspired that an animal can have grit. I think it's this, and again, my study of energy and energy flow, grit is also catching. It has the ability to be contagious, right? When you're next to somebody and you're challenging with them, that grittiness, you get to borrow some energy from them and they get to borrow it from you. The great part is you're not depleted. It's like your grit window grows and has extra for somebody else. And I've seen people do such big community work that I've seen things like enough love for the group where cumulatively, energetically, that energy grows so much there's extra. And where does that extra go? I literally think it goes out to the world, right? If we if we believe, and was the Tesla point I was going to make earlier, and I'm having trouble pivoting because I find these subjects a lot easier.
Listen,
and
man,
interesting, right?
don't force it.
Okay,
like, whatever you want to talk about, let's talk about it.
So Nicholas Tesla identified that if you have a particular portion of human beings that are coexisting either in a room or a town or a state, there's a percentage of those people that if you change their basic operating system, so let's say my feeling is the problem with the world today is fear. And I used to say it's greed and laziness, but I minded that deeper. Greed is actually the fear of not having enough. Laziness is the fear so much that you do nothing, right? So if we agree, and you don't have to, that the ill of the world is fear, what's the answer? Because fear, the opposite of fear is courage.
I was going to say
right?
courage.
But courage does not have as much energetic medicine for the world as what I am going to say and what Jesus was the greatest example of, which is love. And love doesn't have an opposite. Love only has the opposite of the absence of love.
Right. It's a vacancy.
Correct.
Hate is not the absence of love.
Correct.
Indifference and just neglect. Yes.
Right. So if we then believe that the counteracting, not opposite, but the counteracting power energetically is love, and the problem is fear. So if we take a room of fearful people and we change their basic operating system to love, then how many people do we have to change in that room to change the whole room? Now, what's really interesting, if you take the global population right now and you use his formula, it's about 400,000 people. So that became doable in my mind. I went, wow, okay, that's a number. If I can contribute and other people can contribute, and that's the manifestation of Ripple Ranch. I was like, well, what am I doing? I mean, I'm raising goats, I'm making my living, I'm trying to go on a couple of trips a year, but what am I doing? What's the legacy I'm leaving? I mean, in the book I wrote, I talked about if you truly want to like gear your life towards your eulogy. What is going to be read about you when you die? And if you think about it, it's not going to mention the house you live in. It's not going to mention the car you drive, and it's not going to mention how much money you have in the bank. But the reality is we spend 90% of our waking moments on those three things, and the legacy, the actual things they're going to talk about us when we die, we spend very little attention with that. We just don't devote ourselves to the things that really matter and that footprint that we're putting in life. So my choice for Ripple Ranch was I need to have a place where I can help humanity in the way that I can. And, you know, that whole like imposter syndrome comes in every time I say it. Every time I say it, well, who the fuck are you, Mark? I don't have that much, but what I do have is I have like this creation of a mission and an ideal. And then the right people just keep showing up, right? And I'm not some rich guy that owns 44 acres, 22 minutes from downtown Boise. I'm on the skinny limbs to make that place happen. And we have, I mean, the amount of improvements we've done on that thing in 2 years would blow you away. And it's all done on Facebook Marketplace and sweat and hours and time and energy, plus running 3 companies. And I'm tired. I've worked really, really hard to kind of create this. And, you know, we're originally when we spoke about, I need to go back just a little bit. So the ripple effect is also related to my study of near-death experience. I have this crazy, and I know it roots from, so I have had about 9 interactions with the other side through dreams in my life. I've had a few clairvoyant dreams where something that I was supposed to tell somebody was true. I had an interaction with an angel who helped me help a woman die, and I got to experience her doing that. And I know that sounds goofy. You're just going to have to trust me. I was in the presence of an angel that was so intoxicating that I prayed for her to come back for over a year every single night. Because to be in the presence of the divine, and she was definitely feminine, and she was the embodiment of all knowing, all loving, all kind. And it's intoxicating for us to be in the presence of that. And because I've had those interactions since I was a child, I've had this like super interest with what human beings actually know, not what they think, but what they know about the other side. And one of the best studies is people who have had near-death experiences. What's so cool about near-death is that they keep having the same message. You get a 5-year-old kid who says the same thing as an 86-year-old guy, and blah, blah, blah. So I went beyond watching documentaries and reading books. I have friends. So I have this really great friend named Ewan, and Ewan is a beautiful man. I mean, he was with low oxygen for almost 40 minutes. He suffered long-term brain damage as a result. He's a really interesting character because he forgets where he's at and all kinds of stuff, but he's brilliant. He's brilliant. So dad works at Yale, brother works at Harvard, so high level, raised in Zimbabwe, then in Europe, then in Canada, and he's a veterinarian. So a brilliant mind, right? So Ewan had a very similar experience to others, but he has this brilliance to detail it. And because he was so, I think, on the edge of life and death, meaning, and I can tell you that from my angel experience with the woman that I helped to do, I was allowed to observe a human being's death process. So it was as an observer. It was the weirdest thing. She just let me like pay attention. And Ewan, when he passed, and they shocked him back to life 8 times on the hospital ride back. Everybody who came into the hospital room afterwards expected to see a vegetable because he was low oxygen so long, and he came back mostly complete. The interesting part is, and he used this word, and he's a believer, he used this word, when I was in the presence of the ultimate consciousness. So that's what he called it. He goes, and I can tell you from my own experiences, the human language does not have the ability to capture words that explain the enormity of these things, right? So that's as close as he could get. It was as close as I can get to express some of these things to you, because the human language lacks the depth and the breadth to be able to understand these things. And so when Ewan, again, used his words, was in the presence of the ultimate consciousness, and he got to do his life review, he expected to see a movie. So there was enough of the human part of him that was still aware, that was predicting what was going to happen next. And so he expected to see like a movie shown to him of what his life events were. Here's how you did in the world, right? But instead what happened is he said that the entire understanding of all things greater than him burst from within him. And he said his human side was super shocked to realize that he was carrying the divine, the internal truth, God, Jesus, all those different things. The energy and the wisdom was collected inside of him in his spirit. And so it wasn't that it was out there in the nether. We were packing it around in us. And he said, so listen to this. So he said he actually got to see every act of good intention and bad intention he made in his entire life, and he got to see it ripple through humanity. He watched it go from person to person. But he said the entire experience lasted like a second, and he had universal understanding of the whole thing. So, and he remembers a couple distinct ones. A funny story about how he came across a rabbit when he was a child, and it was suffering, and so he decided to beat it with a stick till it died to put it out of its suffering. And the spiritual side of him saw that as a good thing, and it like debriefed it for him. But those times a million interaction in his life, and then he watched the ripple effect of kindness, greed, betrayal, all those things, those acts that he made ripple forward. His humanness expected that time frame to be 6 or 7 people deep. He said it was amazing, Marc. He goes, the acts of kindness literally went around the planet like 3 times. They lasted for years. Every single, like, cashier at the Jiffy Lube. Okay, how much is it today? Hey, you have a great day. That rippled forward for years. So it raised my level of consciousness on how important it is of where I hold myself in the world and how kind and thoughtful and grateful and what we're sending forward through humanity. Now, here's the real freaking double twist. He also got to see the acts of kindness and greed and all those things that happened behind him and rippled up through him as well, all again in a millisecond. So what the life change for me that has really happened is I realized this is not just about me becoming a better human being. I believe God pushed me in that direction so that I'm more whole and complete to be in service to humanity. Elevate yourself, and then you have the platform to at least provide an opportunity for the elevation of others. And that's what we do. So in the spirit of pivot, a simple thing like goat milk, I have people come from
simple thing like goat. We come full circle, baby.
Right, there you go. So
Right.
So to pivot to that, the choice to do goat milk to the city of Boise and to make this available to them, it's not a very profitable business. It's a lot of work. But I have these does that I have babies every year because people come from all over the country to get goats from me, and I just dry them up. And it seemed a shame. Like, you know, this is one of the healthiest foods on the planet. I've spent a decade perfecting making great tasting goat milk. I know the systems. I have a duty to share that. And I also have a duty to be able to create abundance, you know, in that. So I don't mind charging extra because I believe we're doing it really well. And I believe that there are good people that are discerning that want to support companies that want to make a difference. I just believe that's true. And I've proven that's true. Our milk is $20 a gallon. Going rate in the valley is 14. I don't really spend any time defining or defending my price point. I just know that's what I need to make it worth my time, to pay my hired pin well, to feed my goat right, to do all those different things correctly, and to have some abundance to give back to the world. I don't feel anything other than it just is what it is. And so that was the choice, to use just another tool to get more people on the ranch, get exposed. And the energy that's in that goat milk is positive for them nutritionally, and the intention behind it. And I have a duty to send that out to the world. So, you know, we're selling goat milk. I was never had an objective to become a dairy. But it's just another one of the things that we're doing to make sure we're safe. And I feel really grateful. Grateful for people like my customers who end up becoming meaningful friends. It's just that much more positive ripple among human beings. And this goat milk is like the connection. So,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think there was I had an education company. I love teaching. It's something I thought I would do for the rest of my professional life and probably beyond. I would very unfortunately don't have that company anymore, for a myriad of reasons, not the least of which what I was teaching no longer is valuable. So I was helping students get into college for SAT prep, ACT prep, almost 20 years, and the admission structure changed over the last several. But the point is that I was talking to a student actually at a graduation party. I never went to graduation parties, but I was at the end and I was like, oh, forget it. I'll go. I really like these kids. I'll go hang out with them. So I go and I meet the parents, because I usually didn't even meet the parents. Kids were coming to my classroom and I was giving them merch, and they'd go home. And so the parents and I were chatting, and then I was chatting with the kids, and they were talking to me about my business, right? About the business aspect of, you know, helping students get better at work. And I said, look, I would love, I so believe in this, in the relationships and how much I can benefit people. I would love to be able to do it for free, right? That's just like, I'm not worried about the money. But what I can tell you is it would be a far worse product for a number of reasons, right? First off, if it was free, the students wouldn't really care, right? Because they'd only value it as much as it costs them. And if I was a bargain basement person, then I would actually get a lot of clientele that were looking for bargain basement, which means they were valuing the price over the actual product. So we went through all of these different things. It's like, if I charge a rate that produces, as you're saying, abundance, then I have the capacity to do a lot of things with that, right? Which I do. Right? A lot of the aspect of the success of the tutoring company was that there was a broad community that loved it, and you could identify members of the community through the merchandise that I would give them, like pink hoodies or blue hoodies or whatever, sweats and all these things. And what people would report is when they would see someone that they didn't know came to my classes with a hoodie on, they'd be like, you're one of my people. And they would, in fact, become friends. And people started dating after they found out. It was the first time when I actually understood the power of feeling like you're a member of a community that somebody else is. Because the only people that could get the merch were my students. I didn't sell it to them. It was free. And if you weren't one of my students, there was nothing you could do to get it. And so it is one of those things where creating abundance, which allows you to self-identify a different clientele base, and then allows you to do more with the abundance. It's a really important thing. So when you say, hey, look, my milk is $20 a gallon, verse 14, it's like, yeah, I don't think you should justify that. I don't think you should try to explain it. I think for the right people, the value there will be self-evident, and the reason for the pricing will be self-evident. You know, if they want to come into the Ripple Ranch and see the process and the experience and the life and the death and all of it, I think that would be a far greater value to them than perhaps somebody who's like really trying to grind down for every single like penny through volume and things of that nature.
Sure. Yeah, no, I don't disagree at all. And it's a really interesting thing, So pivoting just a little bit more, and I think this is important, right? Because we're talking about some of the quadrants. Have you read Blue Zones? Or
yes, absolutely.
Okay,
big fan.
So what's really interesting that I find so cool, and this is more acknowledgement of things that are ethereal or intrinsic or let's call it the force, right?
Sure.
So longevity. Nutrition and exercise is only like 40% of that. The rest is like lifestyle. I mean, you saw his quadrants, right?
Right. And again, to be clear, Blue Zones is a book that was talking about longevity. It's like, look, let's look at a world map and let's find places where people have like 10 to 100 times higher probability of living past 100. And let's circle those. Those became the Blue Zones. And the book was all about traveling to these places and finding out, like, is it their diet? Like, is it that he's walking 10 miles a day? Like, what is it? And yeah, it became more of, this is your overall lifestyle, which includes diet and exercise and stuff, but it's an attitude, at least to some degree, an attitude towards the world and the fellow man. There was the backwater town in like Italy where they didn't even have antibiotics until 20 years prior or something.
Right.
And here's a centurion, somebody who's 102, and the interviewer asks him something about his life growing up, and he's like, I don't know, you got to go ask my brother. He lives around the corner. He's 104. So it's like, here's 102 and 104. Like, how have they survived this long?
Right. Yeah. So what I enjoyed about that I thought was really profound was that, did you see, so they just released the documentary on Netflix, and it doesn't dive as deep in the areas I find interesting in the book, but it adds some elaboracy that wasn't in the book about how they tried to manufacture a blue zone in a small community in Wisconsin. Did you?
No.
So like the things that they did is like create walkways and create volunteer groups, because he identified that when people have like a mission and a spiritually based community that they're invested in making collective change together, that creates longevity. And I love the part of us as human beings that's mysterious, the parts that we can't put our finger on, the part that is inside of us that may be our spirit or our soul or, our connection to God, and that we can't really define, but we can define like results like that. Like, the gathering around the dinner table, it's not the food as much as the energy that's collected in those people working together. That part is as much as the food that's getting created. So I just find I find it very rewarding that we're beginning to discover and have evidence that longevity is not just about nutrition and exercise. It's about the quality of human existence you lead, right? And when we're less stressful because we're easier going, when anxiety doesn't show up as much, when we're fulfilled because we're on a mission that makes a difference for other people that's greater than us. I love when we begin as human beings to begin dangling a carrot that's desired, but it's also desired for the quality of humanity. The dangled carrot of a super sharp car is not necessarily in the betterment of humanity. But what I really love is that when we use, because I'm a very conservative politically, and I don't believe that. I believe there are really good ways that we can help to influence humanity without making people do things, right? It becomes unauthentic when I'm going to fine you if you don't toe the line, right?
Right, compulsion. Right.
Yeah, whatever. And when we can move people intrinsically, and we can create evidence of a benefit to them, to kind of take the hard road and to do the deep work and to look and to see, how collectively people are beginning to really look deeply. And I believe more are. I just think right now we're in a really interesting place with technology and all the other things. But, it was 4 years ago now where people were bonking each over the head for toilet paper, pushing old people out of the line because they scared they wouldn't have enough paper to wipe their ass.
Can you believe that?
Yeah.
Can you believe that?
Yeah.
I forgot about the toilet paper.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I know, and
what?
that's my example of why homesteading is such a growing thing right now, because that was, you can have your opinion about it. Mine was it was the scamdemic, and it's just whatever it was. And now
I've never heard that phrase, scamdemic.
Yeah,
I appreciate that.
Yeah. And so what it was more proliferation of what I also call scarology, because we're so pushed in humanity by being afraid to create action. And when we're afraid, we're in that anxiety mode. We're being presented with the solution, which is to mark to the beat of the drum of the powers that be. So I'm going to make you afraid, and then I'm going to tell you what you should do next, who you should vote for, what you should do in your job, what you should hold dear, all those other things. And they're getting really good at it. So are corporations. So you see that the use of scary news is what creates the state change in modern culture to provide an open space to be then filled with either the next product commercial break, which is major corporations and the products they're selling. And I don't think they're the enemy, but they're just doing good marketing.
Right. This is the playbook that's very, very clear. You create a problem and then you also present the solution. But to get people to take you up on the solution, they have to deeply feel that there's a problem, A, and B, not be able to flush out a solution on their own. Right. Now, mind you, you're telling them the product. They're not, the problem. They're not experiencing the problem in their life. And saying like, gosh, like my foot really hurts. Like I have this pain. I have to go get like something acute, something very clear. And you just sit here. It's like, do I really have problems? Well, no, unless you turn on a television. And then you're like, oh, you have all kinds of problems. You have all kinds of problems with hormone replacement. You have all kinds of problems with your hair or with all kinds of problems everywhere. Right. So yeah, but to get people to believe in your solution, you have to deeply convince them about a problem that they can't solve without you.
Right. Yeah. And that's the study that politicians and media and corporations have become very good at. Right. Very good. And then again, I call it scarology. So if we had the capability to shift to then, instead of fear, here we are again, to love, then we could celebrate that. And that's, I have some big ideals one of these days to be working and bringing people on who are leaders in these companies and say, hey, well, let's change the operating platform that you're coming from. How can you love your customers better? How can you love your employees better? How can you love humanity better? And then use the company to do that. You're a massive influencer. You have an influence over people. And I don't think I'll ever have the highest levels, but I would love to bring owners of companies with 100, 200, 300 employees, and realize if I could change the heart in some way for the positive of that man or woman, their influence circle over those employees and those customers is so profound that just a minor change, now all of a sudden think about the ripple of that. And that's some of the aspirations that we have on the ranch. And we have this 600-foot mountain climb. We have this cold plunge. We have the sauna. We have a meeting space. We can do breath work that helps people to literally alter states and have an experience that's similar to things like mushrooms or ayahuasca or that sort of thing, just through breath, that creates this hyper awareness of, your essential self on the inside. So yeah,
You've put in a lot of work, Mark.
Yeah.
Amazingly, you're talking about love. I have a very dear friend from jiu-jitsu named Marc, who's this mountain of a man, 250 pounds. One of the most lovely human beings I've ever met. And I asked him one day in between roles, I was like, Marc, what do you do? And he's like, oh, I kind of assisted living stuff. I'm like, what do you mean? So it turns out Marc has, I think, 100 or 200 employees. And I asked him, like, are you going around what is your function within this company? And it was so beautiful. He was like, I hired a CEO. So, somebody in the trenches really paying attention to all these things. He's like, my job, what I love the most is I just go around and love on my employees. And the way he said it, he's like, I'll go to a location and I'll go up to people. And he's not being disingenuous. He's like, I see you. I want you to know. And without you, all of these things wouldn't work. And I know that maybe no one else sees you, but I see you. And he's like, and he'll give them, like a gift card to go get a massage or something. He's like, take care of yourself. 100%. He's like, I get it. And it was so great. Most people, if they had said that to me, I'd be like, man, you're just like, you're buying off your employees with like a $50, like, God, look at that. But the way he conveyed him, like, oh God, you believe this. You believe this. This is real for you. And your employees recognize that it's real for you. So it's not this cheap, buying your allegiance and commitment. It's a real relationship, like a real connection to these employees. And because of that, you have this incredible business. It was really touching. So when you're talking about like find the 100 or 200 or 300 employee business and train the business leaders or teach them or help them see the benefits of loving their employees, it's like, man, he's the number one person I could think of that just gets that in spades, and he's hugely rewarded for it.
Wow, that's super interesting you just said that. And by the way, I really want to acknowledge his place, and I also want to acknowledge your recognition of that, because intention is super important. And again, for you to be able to absorb that and see him was a gift. So that was, good on you and good on him. I love hearing that there are other people with, and the difference of what you noticed in him was his intention.
Right.
His intention was genuine.
Yes.
He got to be like a little Mary Poppins and go around to his employees and make their day. I mean,
yes.
Talk about a gift of a platform, right? There's how much is enough, right? Really, how much is enough? What do you need? I mean, in the United States today, with inflation rates, you can live in a crazy lifestyle for $4 million in net worth, $3 million in net worth, own your house, own your cars, and then you're really like trying to figure out how to spend money. Like at that point, beyond that point, it's like, what do I spend money on today? Because you're cash flowing up in the $25,000 or $30,000 a month range with that kind of net worth with no bills. So really, do you need more? So why don't you let that company kind of do what it's going to do, and then go out and spend your time with intention like what that guy does.
Right.
What a beautiful thing.
Oh, he's a beautiful person.
Oh,
and
cool. I'd like to meet him sometime.
Oh, absolutely. I'd love to introduce you. He's one of the people that I love helping, right? Like I love having value. I love having capacity to improve somebody's life. It's very hard to find where you can do that. And I think in the average person's life, it's almost impossible. In my life, I used to always have teaching. I could teach and help anyone. And you're really grabbing some young person at this incredibly impactful point in their life when they're trying to get in college. It's like, come with me. Trust me. Come with me. We're going to get you there. I know you're horrified, but trust me. Once that was gone, the biggest question I had is like, well, how am I going to help? Like, what am I going to do? And in the jiu-jitsu community, I've been training for a long, long time. And I was like, okay, I've never looked at it this way. Like, I've always helped my friends, but I've never looked at it this way where it's like, this is where you're going to get your helping fix. And Marc was one of the first people, again, mountain of a man, incredible physical capacity. But he realized really quickly, he's like, oh my God, what you're doing is crazy, right? Like, it's so, every time I roll with you, I learn like 10 things. You teach me more in a 6-minute training session than anyone else is. And he was so appreciative of it. It was like, yes. Like, and some of my friends, including Marc, would ask, like, what do you get out of this? Like, what are you getting out of training with us? Like, you come every day and you show us things and you help us. Like, I feel bad. What are you getting out of it? I'm like, I'm getting this. I'm getting the ability to help someone and be part of a community that values what I have to offer. And it's, again, he's just a really unique person.
Well, and again, it's the energetic, intention of all of that. I get, I teach people how to raise goats. And so I have courses and it teaches them how to do that. And then we actually have like a goat club membership, if you can imagine that. So it's $20 a month and people just basically, I do videos that show people how to take care of problems when they show up on my ranch, and I release videos and they get discounts on the site and all that stuff. But we have like a 911 line, right? So they basically
like a goat emergency.
Correct. Yeah. And because vets don't know goats and because there's no good resources out there to learn, it's 2:00 in the morning, your goat's on his side, he's whatever, and you don't have anybody to call. So I actually make my phone number available to people to call that as a part of that service. Wow. And the goal as it grows is to have a staff of people who are just on that call, right? So what's really interesting is that people will call me and they'll say, usually fairly deep in the conversation, by the way, I'm not a goat club member. I'm sorry I called. I'm like, I would answer anybody's questions anytime. If you want to support us by being a member, awesome. But the reality is it's fun for me. It's fulfilling for me to know that you'll have somebody to be able to call, because I know what you're dealing with right now is really hard and there's nobody else you can reach out to. So there is no freaking way I give a rip whether you're a member or not. I would help you either way. So for me, I understand what you're saying with that, because it's not because I get gratitude. It's that there's intrinsic benefit inside humanity to be in service to others and something greater to yourself, right? We're back to that blue zone circle. So that blue zone circle is an exercise of that muscle of being in service to our community and other people and having intention and being mindful and looking for opportunities to do that in different ways and creating ripples. So that's where collective change, as people think more, as they begin to soften a little bit, then we can, collectively do that. And it's about, again, 400,000 people on the planet thinking about love. And how do we manifest love? Well, things like service and kindness and gratitude and acknowledgement and a gift card or whatever it is, right? Whatever it is, it's always clear when you're being loving, and it's always really clear when you're not. Right?
That's super fair. It's usually pretty clear when you're not.
Yeah. So one other thing I do want to mention, though, that was interesting that you mentioned about him. I wonder if the blue zone guy has ever thought about like the blue zones for companies and how it equates. If they were to bring in those acts of service and those mission mindedness and then a well-being and an exercise and fitness program, if they could actually measure the bottom line of a company and it would become more productive. But as well, I mean, what ends up happening to the community as a whole? How much turnover do you get in your employees? All the demographics of it, that would be a super interesting study.
Right. Because again, when you bring practical value to something that I think a lot of people would be like, oh, that's kind of woo-woo. It's like, but wait, as woo-woo as this may be, you are going to get most likely this result. So like, is it woo-woo because we don't know why you get that result? do you care? Or should you take this into account with serious consideration and intention because you will get a result? It's like, look, there could be business benefits to having. I have a very good friend, another individual from jiu-jitsu who started a consulting company, trying to figure out how to get people away from pornography, get people away from alcohol, get people to heal relationships, and have a company that helped their employees do that, because it would be in the employer's best interest to have a workforce that was emotionally healed, not addicted to porn, not, substance abuse, all of these things. The productivity and capacity of those individuals, not just in the company, but in the world, would be far greater. I mean, I think that's obviously a really complex thing to try to do when you're trying to make, like dog beds.
Right.
But, like whatever the product is, whatever the mission is of the company, it will be improved if you helped your employees become better outside of their job.
Right. Yeah, no, super interesting.
Yeah.
One other thing I wanted to point out too, by the way, in terms of like blue zone and that type of thing. Goat milk, so you know, because I do want to break that down for you. Mm-hmm. So goat milk is so profoundly good for you. We should not be treating it as a drink. We should be treating it as food. I'm 53 years old. I drink almost all my calories in goat milk. So I only eat one meal a day, maybe one small stack. I drink about 3/4 of a gallon of goat milk a day. So I'm getting about 1,700 calories in goat milk, and the remaining amount of my calories is dinner. So I eat one meal a day, and I regularly fast. It's the number one source on the planet over coconut oil for MCTs, so medium chain triglycerides, which are really profoundly small fat molecules that are allowed to go directly to the brain. They're carrier molecules. And if you see or understand how your body works with food, MCTs should be a part of people's regular diet. MCTs, when you drink them, have you ever had like bulletproof coffee or done any of that stuff?
I'd put coconut milk or coconut oil. Yeah.
Okay. So when you do straight MCTs, which are just, it's literally a scored in thing, it's really difficult on your system to assimilate that in its raw self.
Too much, you're running to the bathroom instantaneously.
That and feeling like a stomach ache and those sorts of things. So goat milk is this really great source of MCTs, which is powerful stuff. At the same time, you have all these live microbiomes, right? Mm-hmm. So as a society, we're eating dead food. Nothing is alive that we're eating anymore, really, except for yogurt. That's about the only true living thing that's alive that we're taking into our bodies. And so goat milk has all kinds of prebiotics, which feed our gut health, and probiotics that come in afterwards. Right. Live enzymes. I mean, it's a living thing you're putting in your body. So you're getting all these positive microflora, things that are going in and creating gut health. It's one of the things that we see a huge advantage of right out of the gate with our customers is if they have any skin-related issues, those literally go away. I mean, you take a kid with eczema, give him goat milk for like 2 weeks, his eczema is gone. And it's that fast. We're talking people who've had it their whole life, and they drink goat milk and it goes away. And all that's related to gut health because our skin is our largest organ, right? So it really promotes organ health. And it's because of its nutrient density, and by respect to its nutrient density and low caloric value, you're following with the Blue Zone's principles, which is eat low calories and eat high nutrition density.
Yes.
So one of the most nutrient dense in relationship to its caloric output is goat milk. And so using that as a basis of calories, the live microbiome, MCTs, and then also bioavailable A, B, C, D, and magnesium and calcium. So everybody right now in the health world's talking about magnesium and the benefit to sleep and how our neural pathways are dictated to it, brain health, the elimination of ADHD and blah, 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 all this different stuff that are being related to magnesium. The bioavailable magnesium in goat milk is through the roof. So it just goes on and on. There's 4 different characteristics of it that are massively anti-inflammatory. So inflammation is the basis of disease and pain. You're taking in and ingesting a regular anti-inflammatory that's healthy for you. There's another component to it that it's one of the few things that breaks down biofilms. So you actually have, when you have like candida, or you have bacteria that's living in your body, or molds and funguses and all those things that like to live, they surround themselves with a film that very few things on the planet can break down, including your own immune system. Your immune system, that's how it protects itself from them. What breaks it down? Goat milk. So it's amazing. I call it an anointed food. What I mean by that is a food made by God for human beings to ingest. It's literally like he made an animal for us to work with, coincide with, and produce milk. And we are the only country in the world that forgot. We are the only one. Mexico, Europe, all the other countries, maybe Canada, you could point their finger at them too, but all the rest of the world drinks goat milk and eats goat meat. It's a better animal for the planet. It's a better animal for human beings. And for anybody who's listening to this that's not in the Boise area, raw goat milk is hard to find. If you have a raw goat milk producer, support them. It's difficult to do that. And I'm telling you that if you're health conscious and you don't drink raw goat milk, you're literally missing possibly the most important element to your diet that's available. It's that big.
Man, okay, so people want to find you. Ripple Ranch?
Yeah, we have rippleranchidaho.com, and then we also have boisegoatmilk.com. And
That's
then
beautiful.
Yeah, and then, I own packgoats.com that helps people with all the goat stuff, and then I'm an adventure consultant. I've owned that company forever. I own Top End Adventures and blah blah blah. So it's
beautiful. Yeah. Well, I got to tell you, I'm very excited to try this goat milk you brought
cool.
me today.
Yeah,
it'll be the first time. Yeah, I really enjoy goat cheese, but I've never had goat milk.
You'll see it just tastes like whole cow's milk. It's
awesome.
It's good, and it's good in the fridge for like 2 weeks. It's amazing how long it lasts.
Perfect. Well, Marc, listen to me. Thank you so much for coming. Again, as I told you beforehand, I had no idea where the conversation was going to go, but after speaking with you on the phone and then chatting with you before, I'm like, it's going to be good. And you exceeded expectations.
Oh, so I'm glad.
Anyway, thank you for coming. If the listeners are interested in goat milk, reach out, check it out, and hopefully we can do this again.
Okay, great.
Right, thanks. This podcast is brought to you by MTU Studios. If you're looking to start a podcast or need content for your business or personal use, content of any type, please reach out to MTU Studios. MTUstudios.com. We'd love to help.